The Tuesday Night Club's shocking start, designed to capture attention, spark suspense, and raise intriguing questions, while succinctly summarizing the entire story in an engaging, high-energy way. The hook is crafted to maximize click-through rates, CTR, by hooking viewers immediately with vivid imagery, mystery, and a call to unravel the truth. It covers the essence of all 10 chapters without repeating specific incidents, scenes, or conversations, ensuring a fresh and compelling overview that aligns with the story's progression.
Chapter 1. Whispers in the Village. The autumn wind whispered through the narrow lanes of St. Mary Mead, carrying the faint scent of damp earth and fading roses. It was one of those crisp September evenings in 1927, where the sun dipped low behind the thatched roofs, painting the sky in hues of amber and violet. Nestled in the heart of this unassuming English hamlet, where every cottage held a story and every garden fence bore the weight of neighborly gossip, stood the modest home of Miss Jane Marple. Her dwelling, a charming affair with ivy-clinging walls and a front door painted a cheerful robin's egg blue, was a sanctuary of quiet observation. Miss Marple, with her snow-white hair neatly pinned and her eyes sharp as a hawk's, had lived here for decades, piecing together the intricate puzzles of human nature from the comfort of her chintz armchair. On this particular Tuesday, she had extended an invitation to her nephew, Raymond West, a man whose flair for the dramatic often outshone his literary talents. Raymond, a rising star in London's literary circles, penned novels filled with brooding anti-heroes and labyrinthine plots that critics alternately hailed as genius or pretentious drivel. He had telegraphed his acceptance with enthusiasm, promising to bring along a few fascinating souls to enliven the gathering. Miss Marple smiled to herself as she arranged the tea service: bone china cups, a silver pot steaming with Earl Grey, and an array of scones baked fresh that morning with clotted cream and strawberry jam from her own garden. She wondered what colorful characters her nephew would drag into her peaceful abode this time. As the clock in the hallway chimed 5, the sound of carriage wheels crunching on gravel announced their arrival. Miss Marple peered through the lace curtains, her curiosity piqued. Raymond stepped out first, his tall frame clad in a tailored tweed suit, a silk scarf fluttering like a banner of sophistication. Behind him emerged a procession that could have stepped from the pages of one of his own books. There was Sir Henry Clithering, the retired commissioner of Scotland Yard, his mustache impeccably waxed, and his gaze carrying the weight of 1,000 solved cases. Beside him walked Jane Hellyer, the celebrated actress whose performances on the West End stage had captivated audiences with her sultry voice and magnetic presence. Then came Joyce Lemprey, the avant-garde artist, whose abstract paintings were the talk of Parisian salons, her bohemian dress swirling with vibrant patterns. Finally, Dr. Pender, the soft-spoken clergyman with a penchant for philosophy, adjusted his spectacles as he surveyed the quaint surroundings. "Aunt Jane," Raymond exclaimed, bounding up the path with arms outstretched, "you look as spry as ever. I've brought the cream of London's eccentrics to your doorstep. Prepare for an evening unlike any other." Miss Marple opened the door with a warm smile, her frail appearance belying the steel in her spine. "Raymond, dear, how delightful! And your friends? Do come in before the chill sets in. The fire's lit and tea is ready." They filed into the sitting room, a cozy space adorned with faded floral wallpapers, shelves brimming with well-thumbed books on botany and birds, and a mantelpiece displaying porcelain figurines from her travels. The rain began to patter gently against the mullioned windows, adding a rhythmic underscore to the introductions. "Sir Henry Clithering," Raymond announced with a flourish, "the man who cracked the infamous diamond heist of '22. Aunt Jane, he's got stories that would make your knitting needles drop." Sir Henry bowed slightly, his eyes twinkling. "Miss Marple, a pleasure. Raymond has sung your praises, says you're sharper than half the detectives I commanded." Miss Marple chuckled softly. "Flattery from a yard man? I shall take it with a pinch of salt, Sir Henry. Do sit down." Next, Jane Helier extended a gloved hand, her perfume, a heady mix of jasmine and ambition, wafting through the air. "Darling Miss Marple, Raymond insisted we meet. He claims your village is a hotbed of intrigue. I adore a good scandal. It's fodder for my roles." "Miss Helier," Miss Marple replied, noting the actress's diamond earrings that caught the firelight like captured stars. "I've read about your triumph in the Scarlet Veil. You must tell me how you capture such raw emotion on stage." Joyce Limpery, with her wild mane of auburn hair tied back in a silk ribbon, surveyed the room as if composing a canvas in her mind. "This place is divine. Such authentic charm. I'm Joyce, painter of dreams and nightmares. Raymond said you'd appreciate my latest series on hidden truths." "Indeed, Miss Lemprey," Miss Marple said, pouring tea. "Art reveals what words often conceal. And Dr. Pender, welcome. Raymond mentions your sermons touch on the mysteries of the soul." The clergyman nodded gravely, his voice a gentle baritone. "Miss Marple, it's an honor. In my parish, I've seen how the divine and the devious intertwine. Perhaps we can discuss it over your excellent scones."
As they settled into the plush seats around the hearth, the conversation flowed like the rain outside, starting light and building to a steady rhythm. Raymond, ever the orchestrator, leaned forward with a mischievous grin. "Aunt Jane, we've all been cooped up in the city smog. Tell us about St. Mary Weed's latest whispers. I hear the vicar's wife has a new hat that's causing quite the stir." Miss Marple's eyes sparkled as she passed around the jam. "Oh, Raymond, you know better than to pry into hats. But yes, Mrs. Price Ridley did acquire one from London, feathers and all. It reminds me of poor old Colonel Bantry's peacock incident years ago. He thought it a sign of good luck until it pecked his prized tomatoes to shreds." Laughter rippled through the room, breaking the ice like a hammer on frost. Sir Henry stroked his mustache. "Village life sounds idyllic, yet I suspect it's riddled with undercurrents. In my line, the quiet places hide the loudest secrets." Jane Helier sipped her tea, her lips curving into a dramatic pout. "Exactly. On stage, it's the silent characters who deliver the fatal blow. Miss Marple, have you ever stumbled upon a real mystery here? Something juicy, like a stolen heirloom or a forbidden romance?" Miss Marple paused, her knitting needles, pulled from a basket beside her, beginning their rhythmic click. "St. Mary Mead is small, but human nature is universal. There was the case of young Elsie Holland, our postmistress's niece. She vanished for a week last spring, only to return with a tale of eloping to Brighton. But I noticed her shoes, caked in local clay, not seaside sand. Turned out she'd been hiding in the old mill, nursing a broken heart over the blacksmith's son." Joyce leaned in, her artist's eyes wide. "Fascinating. I could paint that. Shadows in the mill, the weight of unspoken love. What gave her away, besides the shoes?" "The way she avoided the bakery. She'd always bought scones there, but suddenly not. People don't change habits without reason." Dr. Pender nodded thoughtfully. "Ah, the soul's confessions through actions. In Scripture, it's the small sins that unravel the greater ones." Raymond clapped his hands. "See? Aunt Jane's a natural detective. This is why I brought you all here. We're a motley crew, cop, actress, artist, cleric, writer, and village sage. Why not make this a regular affair? Every Tuesday, we gather to share unsolved riddles from our lives. Call it the Tuesday Night Club." The proposal hung in the air, electrifying the room. Sir Henry raised his cup. "Capital idea. I've got files of bafflers that stumped the yard. Nothing classified, of course." Jane Helier clapped delightedly. "Oh, yes. I'll bring tales from the theater world, backstage betrayals, vanishing props that turn up in the wrong hands." Joyce sketched idly on a napkin with a charcoal stub from her pocket. and I'll illustrate them. Mysteries as art, twisted lines revealing truth. Dr. Pender smiled serenely. I can offer moral quandaries from the confessional, anonymized naturally. The human heart is the ultimate enigma. Miss Marple set down her knitting needles, her expression one of quiet amusement. Well, if you insist. But remember, gentlemen and ladies, the most shocking mysteries often start with the ordinary. A misplaced letter? A forgotten glance? As the rain intensified, drumming a tattoo on the roof, the group delved into preliminary tales to whet their appetites. Sir Henry recounted a curious incident from his early days, a London banker who claimed his safe was robbed by a ghost, only for the spectre to be revealed as a clever ventriloquist accomplice hiding in the chimney. The soot on his cuffs gave him away, Sir Henry concluded to chuckles all around. Not to be outdone, Jane Hellyer spun a yarn about a rival actress whose priceless necklace disappeared during a dress rehearsal. We searched everywhere, the dressing rooms, the props trunk. Turned out she'd pawned it herself to fund a secret rendezvous in Paris. The pawn ticket fluttered from her script like a confession. Joyce shared a bohemian anecdote from her studio. A model who posed for a portrait, but whose reflection in the painted mirror showed an extra shadow. It was no ghost, just a trick of light from a hidden skylight where her lover spied. But it inspired my series on illusions. Dr. Pender offered a gentler puzzle. A parishioner who donated anonymously to the church fund, only for the sums to match stolen goods from a nearby farm. Forgiveness came when he confessed. The theft was to aid a starving family. Mercy over justice that time. Raymond, basking in the glow, added his own flair. In my latest manuscript, the hero unravels a cipher hidden in a symphony score. But real life trumps fiction. Remember that coded telegram I received last year, Aunt Jane? It was from a fan, but the wording echoed a blackmail note I'd read about. Miss Marple listened intently, interjecting with village parallels that drew uncanny connections. Your symphony reminds me of old Mr. Petherick's whistle tunes. He signaled his dog with them, but one day the pitch changed. Turned out he was warning poachers away from his land. The hours slipped by, the fire crackling as logs shifted and sparks danced upward. Outside, the rain eased to a drizzle, leaving the world washed clean. The group, strangers mere hours ago, now shared a bond forged in the crucible of shared curiosity. Laughter echoed as they debated the merits of intuition versus evidence, with Miss Marple's gentle wisdom bridging the gaps. As the clock struck 9, Raymond stretched. What a splendid start! Next Tuesday, Sir Henry, you promised a real stumper. Until then, let's toast to the Tuesday Night Club. They raised their cups, now refilled with sherry, in unison, to mysteries unraveled and friendships kindled. Miss Marple watched them depart into the misty night, carriages splashing through puddles under the street lamp's glow. Raymond kissed her cheek. Aunt Jane, you're the heart of this. Thank you. Alone once more, she tidied the room, her mind already threading the evening's conversations like yarn on a loom. The spark of adventure had indeed ignited, warming her like the dying embers. In St. Mary Mead, where whispers carried far, this was merely the beginning. But for tonight, it was enough. A satisfying hush fell over the cottage, the promise of thrills lingering like the scent of rain-soaked earth.
Chapter 2. The Enigma Unveiled. The following Tuesday arrived with a brisk wind that rattled the shutters of Miss Marple's cottage as if nature itself conspired to heighten the drama. Inside, the Tuesday Night Club reconvened, the air thick with the aroma of spiced apple cake and freshly brewed Darjeeling. The group had expanded their ritual. Each member now brought a token from their world. Sir Henry, a weathered notebook from his yard days. Jane Hellyer, a silk fan from her latest production. Joyce Lempriere, a set of vibrant pastels. Dr. Pender, a slim volume of ethical dilemmas. And Raymond West, a sheaf of manuscript pages scribbled with cryptic notes. Miss Marple, ever the gracious host, provided the hearth's glow and a platter of delicate cucumber sandwiches, their edges trimmed with precision that mirrored her observational skills. They settled into the familiar seats, the rain from last week replaced by a golden sunset, filtering through the windows, casting long shadows that danced like elusive clues. Raymond, unable to contain his excitement, tapped his fingers on the armrest. "All right, Sir Henry, you dangled that bait last time. Spill it, the unsolved riddle that's kept you up at night." Sir Henry leaned back, his pipe unlit but clenched between his teeth, a habit from interrogations long past. "Very well, Raymond, but remember, this isn't one of your novels with tidy twists. This case gnawed at me for years, a thorn in the side of justice. It unfolded in the misty seaside town of Eldridge Bay, back in 1919, just after the war's shadow lifted. Picture it, cliffs plunging into the churning Atlantic, fishermen hauling in nets under stormy skies, and at the edge of town a grand Victorian house called Seacrest Manor." He paused, his voice dropping to a gravelly timbre that commanded attention. The group leaned in, the crackle of the fire the only interruption. The owners were Edmund and Clara Reeves, a couple who'd weathered the war's hardships. Edmund, a former naval officer turned importer of exotic spices, cut a dashing figure with his salt and pepper beard and a limp from a U-boat skirmish. Clara, his wife of 15 years, was a delicate soul, an amateur botanist who tended rare orchids in their greenhouse. She had a laugh like tinkling bells, or so the locals said, but her health was frail, nerves frayed by air raids, they claimed. Jane Hellyer, fanning herself lazily, interjected with a theatrical sigh. "Sounds like the setup for a tragic romance. Was there a rival suitor lurking in the fog?" Sir Henry chuckled. "Patience, Miss Hellyer." Enter Eliza Croft, their live-in companion. Not a maid, mind you, but a refined lady's aide, educated, poised, with a background in nursing from the front lines. She handled Clara's correspondence, arranged social calls, and even assisted Edmund with his ledgers. The trio formed a tight-knit household, almost familial. No children, you see. The war had dashed those hopes. Joyce Lempriere, her pastels idle for now, sketched absent-mindedly on a scrap of parchment she'd brought, capturing the essence of Seacrest in swift strokes of ochre and indigo. A garden full of orchids, exotic and deadly some of them. I once painted a series on poisonous blooms, nature's silent assassins. Dr. Pender nodded solemnly. Indeed, beauty often masks peril. In my readings, the Garden of Eden held both fruit and serpent. Miss Marple, her knitting a steady rhythm, observed quietly, her mind already sifting through parallels to St. Mary Mead's own tangled vines of relationships. Sir Henry continued, painting the scene with vivid detail. It was a blustery Friday in October when the evening took its fatal turn. The Reeves had invited no guests. It was to be a simple supper. Eliza had ventured to the bustling harbor market that morning, bargaining with weathered sailors for the freshest catch. She returned with a basket brimming, plump crabs straight from the traps, their shells glistening like armored jewels, alongside loaves of crusty bread, a wedge of sharp cheddar, and a bottle of crisp white wine from Edmund's cellar. Raymond's eyes widened. Crab supper by the sea? Idyllic, until it wasn't. What went wrong? The preparation was meticulous, Sir Henry said, his tone measured. Eliza boiled the crabs in a massive copper pot, the steam filling the kitchen with the briny scent of the ocean. Clara, feeling sprightly that day, helped pick the meat, her fingers deft despite her fragility. Edmund uncorked the wine, regaling them with tales of his spice voyages to the Indies, cinnamon storms and pepper pirates, he called them. Laughter echoed through the halls as they set the table in the dining room, overlooking the crashing waves. Candles flickered, silver gleamed, and the meal commenced under a chandelier that swayed gently with the wind. Jane Hellyer leaned forward, her fan forgotten. I can see it now, the glow of contentment before the storm. But then, around 8 o'clock, the first pangs struck, Sir Henry replied, his voice darkening. Clara clutched her stomach, her face paling to the color of parchment. Indigestion, she murmured, waving it off.
But soon Edmund doubled over, sweat beading on his brow, and Eliza retched into a napkin. Panic ensued. Edmund staggered to the telephone, summoning Dr. Harlan, the town physician, who lived a mere mile away. By the time he arrived, bundled in his overcoat against the gale, the scene was chaos. Clara convulsing on the Persian rug, Edmund vomiting into a basin, Eliza slumped in a chair, her breaths shallow. Dr. Pender's brow furrowed solemnly. Symptoms of poisoning, surely. But from what? The crabs?
Sir Henry nodded. Dr. Harlan suspected as much. Bad shellfish, a common peril in coastal towns. He administered emetics and called for an ambulance from the nearest hospital in Plymouth. Clara was rushed away first, her condition dire. Edmund and Eliza followed in a second vehicle. The manor stood empty that night, save for the wind howling through cracked windows like a mournful witness. The group absorbed the tale, the room silent except for the ticking grandfather clock. Joyce set down her parchment, the sketch now a haunting depiction of a stormy dinner table. And the outcome? Who survived the night? Edmund and Eliza pulled through, Sir Henry said gravely. Treated for acute gastric distress, they recovered in days, weak but alive. Clara, however, never regained consciousness. She slipped away in the hospital ward at dawn, her final words a whispered plea for her orchids. The town mourned, flags at half-mast on the pier, condolences flooding in from neighbors who'd admired her gentle spirit. Miss Marple posed her knitting. A tragic loss. But you mentioned a puzzle, surely not just misfortune. Ah, the enigma begins, Sir Henry affirmed, flipping open his notebook to a yellowed page. The inquest was routine at first. Verdict, accidental death by ptomaine poisoning from tainted crab. But I was called in by a skeptical colleague at the yard. You see, the autopsy revealed something anomalous. Traces of arsenic in Clara's system, far beyond what spoiled seafood might contain. Not a massive dose, but enough to tip her fragile health over the edge. Raymond whistled low. Arsenic, the poisoner's classic. Where did it come from? That's the rub, Sir Henry said, his eyes narrowing. The crabs were examined, fresh as could be, no contamination. The market vendor swore by his catch, and tests confirmed it. The wine was untainted, the cheese and bread innocuous. Yet arsenic laced Clara's tissues, suggesting ingestion that very evening. Jane Hellier gasped, her hand to her throat. Deliberate? But by whom? Edmund, with his war-hardened resolve, or Eliza, the faithful shadow with hidden motives? Sir Henry held up a hand. Suspicions swirled. Edmund inherited Clara's estate, a tidy sum from her family's shipping fortune. He'd been expanding his import business, perhaps overextended. Whispers of debts surfaced, loans from shady lenders in London. And Eliza? She received a generous bequest in Clara's will, a cottage in the countryside, freedom from service. But more intriguingly, during the war, Eliza had nursed in arsenical wards, handling the stuff for treatments. Joyce's pastels scratched furiously now, outlining figures in suspicion's grip. Motive and means, but opportunity? They all ate the same meal. Precisely, Sir Henry agreed. The crab was shared from a communal platter, picked and distributed by all. No portion stood out, yet only Clara perished. We scoured the manor. No arsenic in the pantry, though the greenhouse held weed killers, common arsenates for pests. But the containers were sealed, no fingerprints amiss. Dr. Pender pondered aloud. A moral quandary. If intentional, was it mercy or malice? Clara's frailty. Perhaps someone sought to end her suffering. Sir Henry shook his head. No evidence of that. Clara's diaries, which we seized, spoke of contentment, plans for a winter trip to the Riviera. No despair. The conversation ignited then, theories bouncing like sparks from the fire. Raymond proposed a fourth party, a disgruntled fisherman spiking the catch over a business grudge against Edmund. Jane Hellier dramatized it. Or a jealous lover. Clara might have had a secret Irmer, scorned and vengeful, slipping poison into her wineglass during a momentary distraction. Joyce added artistic flair. Imagine the arsenic hidden in the orchid petals she admired before dinner, inhaled or ingested unknowingly. Dr. Pender countered, but science demands proof. Arsenic's path must be traced. Miss Marple listened, her needles clicking a counterpoint. In my experience, the simplest acts hide the deepest deceptions, like the time our village grocer's scales were tempered with, not for profit, but to settle a feud over a misplaced order. Sir Henry closed his notebook with a snap. And there you have it, the enigma unveiled, yet unresolved. We questioned, searched, but the trail went cold. Eldridge Bay moved on, Seacrest sold, Edmund and Eliza vanishing into obscurity, but I never forgot, it haunts like an unsolved cipher. The group sat in contemplative silence, the sunset fading to twilight's embrace. Raymond broke the spell. A stumper indeed. Next week we dissected further. Agreements murmured, the evening winding down with shared reflections on fate's cruel twists. As they departed, Miss Marple lingered by the window, watching shadows lengthen. The puzzle's veil had lifted, revealing layers of intrigue, and for now, that revelation satisfied, the thrill of the chase kindled anew.
Chapter 3. The Scent of Scandal. The third gathering of the Tuesday Night Club unfolded under a sky bruised with gathering clouds, the air in St. Mary Mead heavy with the promise of rain. Miss Jane Marple's cottage stood as a bastion of warmth, its windows glowing with the soft flicker of beeswax candles, casting intricate shadows across the dew-dampened roses outside. Inside, the sitting room was a haven of quiet anticipation, the hearth crackling with pine logs that filled the air with a resinous tang. The tea tray, meticulously arranged, bore delicate shortbread biscuits, dusted with sugar, and a steaming pot of fragrant chamomile tea, its soothing aroma a counterpoint to the evening's brewing intrigue. The club members arrived, each bearing a token of their unique perspective. Raymond West with a leather-bound journal, its pages brimming with scribbled theories. Sir Henry Clithering clutching a slim police file, its edges worn from years of scrutiny. Jane Hellier swathed in a sapphire shawl that shimmered like a twilight sea. Joyce Limpriere toting a sketchbook filled with charcoal outlines of stormy cliffs, and Dr. Pender, his fingers tracing a small silver compass, its needle steady as his moral resolve. They settled into the plush armchairs, the firelight weaving a dance of warmth across their faces. Raymond, flipping open his journal with a flourish, broke the silence with a spark of eagerness. Sir Henry, your tale of Eldridge Bay has us hooked. Clara's death, that poisoned crab supper, the arsenic's mystery. Last week's whispers of scandal set the stage. What's next? A secret unburied? A clue to light the shadows? Sir Henry, his police file open to a page marked with a faded ribbon, leaned forward, his eyes glinting with the weight of untold secrets. Indeed, Raymond, we're stepping deeper into the fog of 1919. The Tuesday Night Club thrives on peeling back layers, and tonight we chase a scent, a whiff of scandal that clung to Seacrest Manor like salt to the cliffs. Let's return to that October evening where Clara Reeves met her end and unearth what the whispers concealed. He paused, conjuring the wind-swept manor, its dining room overlooking the churning Atlantic, candlelight glinting off polished silver, and three souls, Edmund, Clara, and Eliza, bound by a meal that turned fatal. The inquest called it potamine poisoning, a tragic mishap, but the arsenic in Clara's system told a darker tale. We questioned the household, the neighbors, even the fishermen who hauled in the crabs. And there, in the crevices of their stories, we found a scandal brewing, one that might point to the poisoned source.
Jane Helier, her sapphire shawl catching the firelight like a wave, leaned in with theatrical intensity. A scandal! Oh, it's straight from the stage! A hidden affair, a betrayed trust. Was it Clara, caught in a lover's tangle? Or Edmund playing the rogue behind her back? Joyce Lempriere, her sketchbook open to a fresh page, began tracing the manor's silhouette, its windows dark with secrets. I'd draw it as a storm brewing, passion and poison swirling together. What did the village whisper, Sir Henry? Dr. Pender, his compass glinting as he turned it in his palm, spoke with quiet gravity. Scandal is the shadow of sin, as Scripture warns. What is done in darkness will come to light. Was this a matter of the heart, or something colder? Miss Marple, her knitting needles crafting a delicate pattern of soft gray wool, listened with a serene intensity, her eyes darting like a sparrow's, catching every nuance. In St. Mary Mead, she murmured, scandal often hides in plain sight, a glance too long, a letter mislaid. What whispers did Eldridge Bay carry, Sir Henry? Sir Henry flipped a page in his file, revealing a handwritten note from a local gossip, Mrs. Tuttle, a widow with a knack for overhearing what others missed. The scent of scandal came from the harbor, he began, his voice measured like a barrister's opening. Mrs. Tuttle, who ran the tea shop by the pier, had a sharp ear for village talk. She told us of a sighting weeks before the supper. Edmund Reeves, the dashing importer, seen at dusk on the cliff path with Eliza Croft, their heads bent close, their voices low. Not unusual, perhaps, Clara's husband and her companion, but Mrs. Tuttle swore Eliza's hand lingered on Edmund's arm, a gesture too intimate for mere friendship. Raymond snapped his journal shut, his eyes wide. A love affair. Edmund and Eliza plotting in the shadows, while Clara tended her orchids. Did Clara know? Sir Henry nodded, producing a second note, a fragment of Clara's diary, seized post-mortem. Clara suspected. Her diary, dated 2 weeks prior, read, Edmund laughs less with me now. Eliza's eyes follow him, bright and sharp like a gull watching the tide. I feel a chill in my own home. Her words hint at a triangle, one she dared not confront. Jane Helier's shawl rustled as she gasped, her voice rising like a stage crescendo. A betrayed wife! It's the heart of every melodrama, love twisted into vengeance. Did Clara confront them, stirring the pot that led to poison? Joyce Lempriere's charcoal scratched furiously, sketching Eliza's silhouette against a stormy cliff, her eyes burning with unspoken desire. Dr. Pender's compass needle stilled, his voice soft but piercing. Love unchecked becomes a flame that consumes. If Eliza coveted Edmund and he her, Clara was the barrier. Yet the Gospels caution against judging hearts too swiftly. Sir Henry held up a hand, tempering the fervor. Let's ground this in evidence. The scandal wasn't just whispers. We found a letter, not Clara's, but Eliza's, tucked in a book of poetry in her room. It was unfinished, addressed to no one. My heart betrays me, but duty holds fast. He promises a new dawn, but at what cost? The ink was fresh, dated days before the supper. It suggests turmoil, love, perhaps, but laced with guilt. Raymond leaned forward, his voice urgent. Eliza is in love with Edmund. Her duty to Clara clashed with her heart. Did she poison to clear the path? Sir Henry's mustache twitched, his eyes narrowing. Possible, but the arsenic's delivery complicates it. The crab was shared, the wine poured from one bottle, yet only Clara suffered. We dug deeper into the scandal's roots. A fisherman, old Tom Griggs, added fuel. He'd seen Edmund slip Eliza a small parcel at the harbor a week before the tragedy. Looked like a secret, he said. When we questioned Eliza, she claimed it was a gift from Edmund, a scarf from his travels. We never found it.
Jane Helier clapped, her shawl shimmering. A secret parcel. It's a prop straight from a thriller. Poison, perhaps, disguised as a lover's token. Joyce's sketch evolved, adding a parcel tied with string, its contents shadowed.
I'd draw it as a Pandora's box, spilling trouble. Was it the arsenic's source? Dr. Pender's compass gleamed as he spoke. The heart's secrets are heavy. If Edmund gifted Eliza poison, their bond was more than love. It was conspiracy. Yet why hide it so poorly? Miss Marple's needles paused, her voice a gentle ripple. In St. Mary Mead, a seamstress once received a ribbon from a suitor, but it was laced with dye to ruin her rival's gown. Small gifts can carry great malice. Your parcel, Sir Henry, smells of intent, but whose? Sir Henry flipped to a final page, a report from a London contact. The scandal spread beyond the manor. Edmund's business dealings weren't just debts. He'd been entangled with a shady broker, one J. Black, mentioned in his ledgers. We traced Black to a dockside tavern where he'd bragged about a big payout tied to Edmund's ventures. Not proof of murder, but a hint that Edmund's secrets ran deeper than love. Perhaps profit, tangled with betrayal. Raymond's journal opened again, his pen racing. A broker in the mix. Edmund's playing a double game. Love with Eliza, money with Black. Clara's death frees him for both. Jane Hellier's voice swelled, vibrant as a spotlight. It's a triangle of treachery. Edmund woos Eliza, uses Black, and Clara pays the price. The parcel was their pact. Joyce's charcoal captured the trio, their lines converging like a storm's vortex. I'd draw them as a whirlpool, pulling Clara under. But how did the poison reach her alone? Dr. Pender's compass turned slowly, his voice solemn. Sin weaves a tangled net. The parcel, the letter, the glances, they point to a shared guilt, but the method eludes. Miss Marple set her knitting aside, her gaze sharp as a needle's point. In our village, a farmer's wife once sent a basket of apples to a rival, one laced with wormwood. The gift was innocent to the eye, but deadly in purpose. Your scandal, Sir Henry, is the perfume, strong, distracting, but the poison's path is quieter, hidden in the everyday. Sir Henry's eyes gleamed with respect. You've a knack for scenting truth, Miss Marple. The parcel, the letter, the whispers, they painted a scandal, but the arsenic's trail stayed cold. Edmund and Eliza closed ranks, their grief or guilt unbreakable. The yard stalled, the case fading like mist over the cliffs. The fire popped, sending sparks spiraling like fleeting clues. Raymond closed his journal, his voice resolute. We're close. The scandal's the spark. Next week, let's find the flame. Jane Hellier adjusted her shawl, her tone vibrant. I'll stage their drama, every glance a clue to their hearts. Joyce sealed her sketchbook. I'll draw their secrets as a storm, breaking over the manor. And I'll seek the moral thread, where scandal meets salvation. Miss Marple poured the last of the tea, her smile serene but incisive. Scandal is the smoke, the fire lies elsewhere. We'll find it yet. As the rain began to patter outside, the group stepped into the damp night, their minds alight with the scent of betrayal. The cottage fell silent, but the whispers of scandal lingered. A satisfying pause, the puzzle's heart beating stronger, poised for the next unraveling.
Chapter 4. Shadows of Suspicion. The fourth meeting of the Tuesday Night Club crackled with an electric undercurrent, as if the stormy skies of St. Mary Mead conspired to mirror the tension of the unsolved mystery. Miss Jane Marple's cottage stood resolute against the gusts, its rose-trellised walls bathed in the flicker of lamplight. Inside, the sitting room was a cocoon of warmth, the hearth blazing with cedar logs that cast a resinous glow over the gathered circle. The tea tray, a study in elegance, bore delicate lavender biscuits and a pot of fragrant lapsang souchong, its smoky notes curling like secrets in the air. Each member arrived with their talismans of curiosity. Raymond West with a fountain pen poised over a fresh notebook, Sir Henry Clithering clutching a faded photograph from his case files, Jane Hellier draped in a velvet cape that shimmered like a midnight sea, Joyce Lempriere
with a sketchbook brimming with angular drawings, and Dr. Pender holding a small brass cross that gleamed with quiet conviction. They sank into their chairs, the familiarity of the ritual now laced with urgency. Raymond, his eyes glinting with impatience, broke the silence. "Sir Henry, you've got us hooked on this Eldridge Bay riddle. Clara's dead, arsenic's the villain, and we're left with a poisoned glass and a tangle of motives. Let's dive into the shadows. Who cast them?" Sir Henry, his fingers tracing the edges of the photograph, a grainy image of Seacrest Manor's dining room, nodded gravely. "Right then. We're past the surface now, into the murky depths. Let's revisit that October night in 1919, but this time we'll stalk the suspects. Edmund Reeves, the charming importer with debts piling like driftwood, and Eliza Croft, the devoted companion with a nurse's knowledge and a hidden edge. The question is, who had the heart, or the nerve, to slip arsenic into Clara's life? Jane Hellier, her cape pooling around her like spilled ink, leaned forward, her voice a stage whisper. "It's always the one you least suspect, isn't it? Like in The Crimson Mask, where the butler poisoned the wine with a smile. Tell me, was Eliza too perfect, hiding a serpent's bite?" Sir Henry's lips twitched, a half-smile born of years navigating theatrics. "A fair question, Miss Hellier. Let's start with Eliza. 35, with a face like a cameo, serene but unreadable. She'd served the Reeves for 6 years, ever since the war's end sent her back from the front lines. Her nursing days gave her a steady hand and a sharp mind. She'd mixed arsenic solutions for trench infections, knew their lethal math. Locals called her a saint, always at Clara's side, reading poetry or arranging her orchids. But there was a crack in her halo. He slid the photograph across the table, revealing a stern-faced woman in a high-collared dress standing beside Clara in the Manor's garden. This was taken a month before the tragedy. Notice Eliza's posture, rigid, her eyes fixed on Edmund, not Clara. A neighbor, Mrs. Tuttle, swore she saw Eliza linger by the cliffs that afternoon, clutching a letter she never mailed. When questioned, Eliza said it was a draft to her sister in York, but we never found it. Joyce Lempriere, flipping open her sketchbook to a fresh page, began tracing Eliza's silhouette with bold, jagged lines. "A letter unposted, that's a scream trapped on paper. I'd draw her as a storm cloud, calm surface, lightning within. What else did she hide?" Dr. Pender, his brass cross catching the firelight, spoke softly. "Letters hold confessions the tongue cannot speak. In my flock, I've seen such silences mask guilt or longing. Did Eliza love where she shouldn't?" Miss Marple, her knitting a steady pulse, tilted her head, her gaze distant yet piercing. "In St. Mary Mead, our postman's daughter once burned a letter meant for a suitor. The ash in her grate told me more than her tears. Small acts, like an unmailed letter, are often the loudest clues." Sir Henry nodded, his voice deepening as he turned to the next figure. Now Edmund Reeves, 42, a man who could charm the scales off a fish. His naval days left him with a limp and a knack for storytelling. He'd spin tales of spice markets in Marrakesh to dazzle dinner guests. But beneath the polish, cracks showed. His import business was a house of cards, loans from London moneylenders, risky deals with Turkish traders. Clara's fortune, locked in trust, was his lifeline. Her death freed it, no strings attached. Raymond's pen scratched furiously. A classic motive, gold over love. But was he desperate enough to kill? What's his alibi for that night? Sir Henry tapped the photograph, pointing to a figure in the background, Edmund leaning against a pillar, a glass in hand. Edmund claimed he was in the dining room all evening, pouring wine and regaling the women with tales from Marrakesh. The footman, off duty but nearby, confirmed Edmund never left the table until Clara's pains began. But here's the twist. We found a ledger in his study, hidden behind a false panel in a bookcase. It detailed payments to a shadowy figure in London, J. Black. No address, just cash transfers. The last entry was dated 2 days before the supper.
Jane Halier gasped, her cape rustling. A secret creditor, or a hired poisoner. It's straight out of a melodrama, betrayal cloaked in shadows. Joyce's sketch evolved, Edmund's face emerging with sharp angles, a man teetering on ruin. I'd paint him with a mask, half hero, half villain. What did J. Black want? Sir Henry shrugged, his eyes clouded with memory. We never traced J. Black. The Yard suspected a loan shark, but the trail vanished in London's underbelly. Edmund swore it was a business contact, nothing more. Yet his hands shook when we pressed him, and his limp seemed more pronounced, as if guilt weighed heavier than shrapnel. Dr. Pender traced the cross with his thumb. The soul falters under such burdens. Perhaps Edmund sought redemption in wealth, only to find damnation. The room hummed with theories, the fire's glow casting their faces in sharp relief. Sir Henry pressed on, his voice a steady anchor. Let's map the night's edges. After the meal, as the pain struck, chaos reigned. Clara's glass, as I mentioned, held that faint arsenic residue. Not enough for a lethal dose alone, but a clue. We scoured the kitchen, the copper pot, scrubbed spotless, the cutting board wiped clean, the wine bottle untainted. But in the pantry, we found something curious. A jar of homemade chutney, served with the crab, sealed, but with a lid slightly askew. No arsenic inside, but its label was in Eliza's meticulous handwriting. Raymond's eyes widened. Chutney! A perfect vessel for poison, spicy, masking any bitterness. Did Eliza tamper with it? Sir Henry shook his head. No, we tested it, clean, but the jar's odd placement raised questions. Eliza said she'd prepared it weeks earlier, a gift for Clara's palate. Yet why was the lid loose? The cook, questioned later, swore she hadn't touched it that day. Jane Halier clapped her hands, her voice rising with excitement. It's a prop, darling, like a mislaid dagger in a play, pointing to the killer. Eliza's the key. She's too composed, too perfect. Joyce's sketchbook now held a jar, its lines swirling with menace. I'd draw it as a Pandora's box, brimming with secrets. Maybe the poison wasn't in the chutney, but nearby, swapped in a moment's distraction. Dr. Pender frowned, his cross glinting. But why only Clara? If the chutney was shared, all should have suffered, unless the poison was targeted, deliberate, personal. Miss Marple's needles paused, her voice soft but cutting. In our village, Mrs. Carter once served jam at a fete, but one pot was laced with salt, meant for a rival who'd slighted her. The jar wasn't the crime, it was the intent behind it. Perhaps your chutney, Sir Henry, was a decoy, meant to draw eyes from the true method. Sir Henry's mustache twitched, a spark of admiration in his eyes. Clever, Miss Marple. The chutney nagged at me, but we had no proof. Another thread, Clara's orchids. She'd been tending them that afternoon, a rare hybrid she'd named Moon's Lament. The greenhouse held arsenical sprays for pests, standard for gardeners. We checked, sealed, no tampering. But Clara's hands, post-mortem, showed traces of soil, as if she'd been potting just before dinner. Raymond leaned forward, his notebook forgotten. Soil? Could she have ingested arsenic from her plants, accidentally? Unlikely, Sir Henry said. The dose was too precise, not a gardener's mishap. But it deepened the mystery. Why soil on her hands when Eliza swore Clara had washed before eating? The group erupted in speculation, their voices weaving a tapestry of possibilities. Raymond posited a stage distraction, Edmund spilling wine to cover a sleight of hand. Jane spun a tale of Eliza slipping poison into Clara's portion during a toast, her nurse's precision masking the act. Joyce suggested a symbolic gesture, arsenic hidden in an orchid bloom, crushed into Clara's glass. Dr. Pender urged caution, citing the parable of the unjust judge, warning against hasty accusations. Sir Henry held up the photograph, its edges worn from years of scrutiny. Here's the final piece for tonight. A letter found in Clara's desk, written but unsent, addressed to her cousin in Bristol. It read, "Edmund's dreams grow wilder, and Eliza's eyes follow him too closely. I fear I'm a shadow in my own home." It was dated the day before the supper. Jane Halier's cape fluttered as she gasped. A love triangle! Clara knew, her heart breaking even as the poison took her. Joyce's sketchbook now held a letter, its edges curling like flames. "I draw it as a wound, bleeding ink. Clara's words indict them both." Dr. Pender's voice was grave. "Jealousy is a serpent, coiling silently. This letter shifts the balance, motive for two." Miss Marple, setting her knitting aside, spoke with quiet authority. In St. Mary Mead, a widow once wrote such a letter, hinting at her husband's betrayal. It wasn't proof, but it lit the path to truth. Your letter, Sir Henry, is Clara's voice from the grave. The fire crackled, its embers glowing like the case's unresolved sparks. Sir Henry tucked the photograph away, his face etched with the weight of years. "That letter haunted me. We questioned Edmund and Eliza. They denied any rift, claimed Clara's nerves conjured fancies. But the arsenic was real, and someone wielded it." Raymond closed his notebook with a snap. "We're circling the truth. Next week, let's tear into their motives, love, money, or something darker." Jane nodded, her cape swirling. "I'll dream up their final moments, every gesture a clue." Joyce brandished her sketchbook. "I'll map their hearts, lines of guilt and desire." Dr. Pender clutched his cross, "And I'll weigh their sins, seeking the spark of redemption." As the storm howled outside, the group lingered over biscuits, their bond forged in the crucible of suspicion. Miss Marple poured the last of the tea, her smile a beacon of calm. "Shadows reveal as much as light. We'll find the hand that cast them." They stepped into the tempest, cloaks and umbrellas battling the wind. The cottage fell silent, but the air thrummed with the case's pulse. A satisfying pause, the shadows of suspicion sharp and tantalizing, poised for the next unraveling.
Chapter 5. The Web of Motives. The Fifth Assembly of the Tuesday Night Club convened amid a gentle twilight haze that blanketed St. Mary Mead, softening the edges of the village like a painter's subtle brushstroke. Miss Jane Marple's cottage emanated a welcoming aura, its chimney puffing lazy curls of smoke scented with apple wood. Within, the sitting room was arranged with meticulous care. Plump cushions on the armchairs, a sideboard laden with almond tarts dusted in powdered sugar, and a samovar bubbling with robust Assam tea. The group arrived with an air of purposeful intrigue. Raymond West toting a velvet pouch of enigmatic trinkets from his travels, Sir Henry Clithering with a slim dossier tied in red ribbon, Jane Hilier swathed in a gossamer scarf embroidered with silver threads, Joyce Lempriere carrying a portfolio of preliminary ink washes, and Dr. Pender clasping a leather-bound tome on the intricacies of the human psyche. They took their places around the hearth, where flames leaped with a merry vigor, casting playful glints on the brass andrens. Raymond, his fingers absently toying with a carved jade figurine from his pouch, initiated the discourse. "Sir Henry, the shadows you cast last time have us all ensnared. Edmund's hidden ledgers, Elisa's unmailed missives, Clara's poignant final words. It's a labyrinth. But what drives a soul to such extremes? Let's unravel the motives, thread by thread." Sir Henry untied the dossier's ribbon, revealing pages yellowed with age and inscribed in his precise script. Motives, yes, the invisible currents that pull the strings. In my years at the Yard, I've learned they lurk in the crevices of daily life, often disguised as necessity or desire. Back to Eldridge Bay, 1919. Edmund wasn't just a spice merchant, he was a gambler in silks and saffron, wagering on volatile markets. His ledgers, the ones we unearthed, showed a cascade of red ink, debts to suppliers in Constantinople, loans from opportunistic bankers who'd scented blood in the water. Jane Hillier, her scarf slipping to reveal a locket engraved with a theatrical mask, tilted her head with chromatic flair. "Ah, the siren call of fortune! In my play, Veils of Deception, the hero pawns his soul for gold. Was Edmund such a man, seeing Clara's wealth as his salvation?" Sir Henry inclined his head, his voice measured like a barrister's summation. "Precisely. Clara's inheritance stemmed from her father's shipping empire, bonds worth thousands, untouchable until her passing. Edmund's business teetered. One more failed shipment and ruin loomed. Neighbors whispered of his late nights poring over maps, plotting routes through pirate-infested waters. But motive alone isn't proof, it's the spark, not the blaze." Joyce Lempriere unfolded her portfolio, displaying inkwashes of turbulent seas and shadowy figures hunched over desks. "I'd depict his desperation as a whirlpool, sucking in everything around him. But what of Eliza? A modest bequest, you said? Enough to fuel resentment?" Dr. Pender opened his tome to a marked passage on the labyrinths of envy, interjected with a thoughtful resonance. "Resentment brews in the quiet hours, like a potion in an alchemist's flask. Eliza's legacy was a cottage in the moors, a pittance compared to Edmund's windfall. Yet psychology teaches us that jealousy isn't measured in pounds. It's the perceived injustice that festers. As a nurse, she'd sacrificed youth in the trenches. Now, in peacetime, she tended Clara like a wilting flower, perhaps coveting the vitality she served." Miss Marple, her knitting evolving into an intricate lace pattern, paused to sip her tea, her expression of reflective poise. "In St. Mary Mead, our milliner, Miss Hartnell, once eyed her sister's brooch with such longing it soured their teas. It wasn't the jewel, but the favoritism that stung. Motives weave from such fragile strands, perceive slights, unspoken yearnings." Sir Henry flipped a page in his dossier, revealing a transcribed interview with a former associate of Edmund's. "Let's deepen the web. Edmund's financial woes weren't solitary. He confided in a colleague, Captain Thorne, over brandy at the Harbor Inn. Thorne testified Reeves spoke of the noose tightening, creditors circling like sharks, said his wife's funds were the lifeboat he needed. But Thorne also noted Edmund's fondness for Clara. He doted on her, in his way, with trinkets from afar. A conflicted heart, perhaps." Raymond extracted a small brass compass from his pouch, spinning its needle idly. "Conflicted indeed, like a captain torn between storm and shore. But if love lingered, why poison? Unless desperation overrode devotion." Jane Hillier rose slightly, her voice swelling like a crescendo in a monologue. "Desperation breeds drama. Imagine Edmund pacing the cliffs, wind whipping his coat, envisioning a future unshackled. Or Eliza in the greenhouse, crushing petals with fingers that knew death's touch, dreaming of a cottage free from servitude.
It's a duet of despair." Sir Henry chuckled softly, appreciating the theatrical lens. "Well put, Miss Hillier. Now consider Eliza's psyche. We interviewed her wartime superior, Matron Ellis, who described her as efficient but aloof, harboring grudges like winter stores. Eliza had lost a fiancé this Psalm. Perhaps Clara's marital bliss chafed. And there's a detail from Clara's maid, overheard Eliza murmuring in her sleep, 'Why her and not me?' Ambiguous but telling. Joyce dipped a quill into an inkwell she'd brought, adding layers to her washes, swirls of green envy amid the blues of melancholy. I'd layer her portrait with veiled eyes hinting at buried longings. Motives aren't singular, they entwine like vines." Dr. Pender read aloud from his tome, his baritone lending gravity. "Jealousy is the jaundice of the soul, quotheth Dryden. In Eliza's case, repressed envy could manifest as a calculated release, poison as equalizer. For Edmund, greed's grip might eclipse affection, turning husband into executioner." Miss Marple's needles clicked in harmony with the ticking clock. "Greed and envy, twin serpents in Eden's garden. Recall our village auctioneer, Mr. Spenlow, who bid fiercely on a rival's heirloom clock, not for timekeeping, but to deny the other its chime. Motives mask as needs, but strip them bare, and human frailty shine through." Sir Henry leaned forward, his dossier yielding a bank statement facsimile. "To the tangible, Edmund's debts totaled over £5,000, a king's ransom then. Clara's bonds, triple that. Post-death he cleared them swiftly, relocating to London with Eliza in tow as secretary. Suspicious, but not damning. Eliza's bequest funded her independence, yet she chose to stay bound to him. Why?" Raymond's compass needle steadied north. "A pact, perhaps, shared guilt forging alliance. Or love, blooming in tragedy's soil." Jane Hillier clasped her locket, her tone laced with pathos. "Love twisted by loss. In my repertoire, such tales end in redemption or ruin. Picture Eliza, her heart aflutter for Edmund, seeing Clara as the barrier. A lover's quarrel unspoken, resolved in silence." Sir Henry nodded, producing a faded postcard from the dossier, Clara's handwriting on a seaside vista. "This arrived from her cousin. Edmund and Eliza share glances like conspirators. I worry. Sent weeks prior, it hints at undercurrents." Joyce's quill danced, capturing intertwined silhouettes against a stormy horizon. "I'd ink them as fused shadows, motive melding into mutual desire." Dr. Pender closed his tome with deliberation. "The psyche's web ensnares all. Repressed jealousy in Eliza, avarice in Edmund. Each thread pulls the other." The fire dimmed slightly, embers glowing like hidden truths. Raymond stowed his compass. "We've spun quite the web, but does it trap the killer?" Jane Hillier sighed expressively. "It's a tapestry of torment. Next time let's tug the threads, see what unravels." Joyce sealed her portfolio. "I'll prepare vignettes of their inner storms." Dr. Pender pocketed his tome. "And I'll seek scriptural parallels for such tangled souls." Miss Marple poured fresh tea, her smile enigmatic. "Motives are the map. Now we navigate the terrain." As dusk deepened, the group dispersed into the misty evening, their minds abuzz with the web's intricate design. The cottage hushed, but the motive's echoes lingered. A gratifying interlude, the puzzle's complexity enriched, awaiting further exploration.
Chapter 6. Clues in the Crab. The sixth gathering of the Tuesday Night Club unfolded under a velvet sky pricked with stars, St. Mary Mead draped in a quiet that seemed to hold its breath. Miss Jane Marple's cottage stood as a beacon of warmth, its windows aglow with the soft flicker of oil lamps casting intricate patterns on the dew-kissed lawn. Inside, the sitting room was a haven of anticipation, the air rich with the scent of warm gingerbread drizzled with lemon glaze, and a pot of fragrant oolong tea steaming on the sideboard. The club members arrived, each bearing their unique offerings. Raymond West with a brass kaleidoscope, its mirrored twists reflecting his restless imagination. Sir Henry Clithering clutching a worn evidence log, its pages crinkled from years of scrutiny. Jane Helier adorned in a feathered fascinator that bobbed like a bird in flight. Joyce Lempraire toting a leather-bound sketchpad filled with chiaroscuro studies, and Dr. Pender, his fingers tracing the edges of a pocket-sized book of aphorisms, his calm demeanor a counterpoint to the evening's fervor. They settled into the plush farm chairs, the hearth's flames weaving a tapestry of light and shadow across their faces. Raymond, twirling the kaleidoscope to catch the fire's glow, broke the silence with characteristic impatience. "Sir Henry, you've spun a web of motives that's got us all tangled. Edmund's debts, Eliza's unspoken jealousies, Clara's haunting letter. We're close to the truth, I can feel it. But what's the next piece? What clue ties the arsenic to the crime?" Sir Henry, his evidence log open to a page marked with a crimson ribbon, leaned forward, his eyes gleaming with the weight of unresolved questions. "We're diving into the mechanics now, the how of it all. In my days at the Yard, I learned that motive is the heart, but method is the hand. Let's return to Seacrest Manor, October 1919, and dissect the supper that turned deadly. The crab, the wine, the chutney. Somewhere in that meal lies the poison's path." He paused, letting the image settle. A dining room perched above the Atlantic's roar, candlelight glinting off silver, and three souls unaware of the venom in their midst. The meal was simple but deliberate. Eliza Croft, the ever-efficient companion, had orchestrated it. She'd trekked to Eldridge Bay's harbor market at dawn, her basket heavy with the morning's catch, crabs so fresh their claws still twitched. Back at the manor, she boiled them in a copper pot, the kitchen steaming with the tang of salt and seaweed. Clara, in a rare burst of energy, joined her, picking the meat with delicate precision, her laughter mingling with the clatter of shells. Edmund, meanwhile, selected a bottle of Sancerre from his cellar, its crisp notes meant to complement the feast. Jane Helier, her fascinator quivering as she leaned in, painted the scene with theatrical flourish. It's a stage set for tragedy, candlelight, laughter, and a hidden dagger, like my role in The Ebony Veil, where a banquet conceals betrayal. Where was the arsenic slipped in? Joyce Lempraire, her sketchpad open to a fresh page, began inking a tableau of the dining table, her pen capturing the crab's jagged shells and the wine's pale gleam. "I draw it as a still life with menace, each claw a potential weapon. Was the poison in the food itself?" Dr. Pender, his book of aphorisms resting on his knee, offered a measured reflection. "The simplest vessels carry the deepest dangers. As the proverb goes, the cup of joy may hold the dregs of sorrow. Perhaps the answer lies in the ordinary." Miss Marple, her knitting needles crafting a lattice of soft wool, listened with a quiet intensity, her eyes darting between speakers like a weaver threading a loom. "In St. Mary Mead, our baker once found his loaves soured by a rival's slight, a pinch of salt mistaken for sugar. The smallest detail can shift the flavor of truth." Sir Henry nodded, flipping a page in his log to reveal a diagram of the dining table annotated with forensic notes. "Let's dissect the meal's anatomy. The crabs were served on a single platter, a communal affair. Clara, Edmund, and Eliza each took portions, picking meat with their forks, no separate servings. The wine was poured from one bottle, glasses filled evenly. The chutney, Eliza's creation, was spooned from a shared jar. Yet forensic analysis confirmed the arsenic in Clara alone, precise, lethal, not a trace in the others. Raymond set down his kaleidoscope, its colors frozen in a fleeting pattern. A surgical strike. But how? If they shared everything, the poisoner needed a magician's touch. Sir Henry's finger traced the diagram, pausing at Clara's place setting. The glass, as we discussed, held a faint residue, not enough for the full dose, but a breadcrumb. We tested the platter's remnants, the pot's dregs, even the shells. Nothing. But here's a new clue: the tablecloth. Post-mortem, we found a stain beneath Clara's plate, barely visible, a faint yellowish smear. Chemical analysis revealed it as arsenic trioxide, diluted but unmistakable. It wasn't on the platter or in the food. It was localized, as if dripped or spilled. Jane Hellier's fascinator bobbed as she gasped. A spill, like a villain in a melodrama, fumbling their poison in haste. Was it meant for Clara alone, or a sloppy attempt gone awry? Joyce's pen scratched furiously, adding a sinister stain to her sketch. I'd ink it as a creeping shadow, poisoning the table's heart. Could it have been in her fork? Coated somehow? Sir Henry shook his head. We checked the cutlery, clean. But the stain intrigued us. It suggested proximity, intent. We reconstructed the meal's flow. Eliza served the crab, Clara picked her portion first, then Edmund, then Eliza. The wine was poured after, Edmund handling the bottle. No one left the table, per their accounts, until the pains began. Clara first, then Edmund, then Eliza, minutes apart.
Dr. Pender's voice was soft but resonant. Timing is the devil's metronome. Clara's early symptoms suggest the poison hit her system first, perhaps a sleight of hand during the serving. Sir Henry produced a small evidence card from his log, detailing a peculiar find. This brings us to the kitchen. After the ambulances whisked them away, we searched Seacrest. In the scullery, tucked behind a stack of flour sacks, we found a tin, a small, dented container, unmarked, containing a fine white powder, arsenic trioxide, pure and potent. No fingerprints, but it was hidden, not discarded. The cook swore it wasn't hers. She used no such chemicals. Eliza, when questioned, claimed ignorance, but her eyes flickered, a tell I've seen in 100 interrogations. Raymond's kaleidoscope clattered to the table. A hidden tin! It's the smoking gun, or rather, the poisoned spoon. Was it Eliza's, stashed in panic? Joined to Hellier's clapped her hands, her voice rising like a crescendo. It's pure theater! Eliza, the nurse, slipping arsenic from her wartime kit, hiding it like a prop behind the scenes. But why only Clara? Joyce's sketch now included the tin, its edges glinting ominously. I'd draw it as a relic of betrayal, buried in the pantry shadows. Maybe it was meant for all, but Clara's frailty made her the victim. Dr. Pender turned a page in his aphorisms, reading softly. Deceit hides in plain sight, cloaked in routine. The tin's placement suggests familiarity, a household hand, not a stranger's. Miss Marple set her knitting aside, her voice a gentle ripple in the room's fervor. In St. Mary Mead, our grocer once found a vial of rat poison behind his oats, placed there by a rival's apprentice. It wasn't used, but its presence spoke of intent. Your tin, Sir Henry, is a whisper of malice, waiting for its moment. Sir Henry leaned back, his evidence log closing with a soft thud. The tin was our strongest lead, but it raised questions. Why hide it so poorly? A seasoned nurse like Eliza would know better. And Edmund, his study held no such secrets, only those ledgers. We pressed them both. Edmund swore he'd never seen the tin, claimed the kitchen was Eliza's domain. Eliza countered that Edmund often rummaged for late-night snacks, could have planted it to frame her. Their stories clashed like waves on the cliffs. The fire crackled. embers dancing like fleeting clues. Raymond leaned forward, his voice urgent. So the tin points to both? Or neither? What else did the manor hide? Sir Henry's eyes narrowed, recalling a detail long buried. One final clue. Clara's napkin. It was found crumpled under her chair, stained not just with wine, but with a faint, gritty residue. Arsenic again. Minute, but present. The other napkins were clean. It suggested she wiped her mouth or hands, transferring the poison. But how did it get there? She'd washed before dinner, per Eliza, yet her hands carried greenhouse soil, a contradiction. Jane Hellier's fascinator quivered as she spun a scenario. Picture it, Clara, unsuspecting, wipes her lips with a napkin laced with death, Eliza passing it with a smile, or Edmund slipping it under her plate during a toast. Joyce's sketch grew darker, the napkin a shroud in her tableau. I'd draw it as a relic of fate, clinging to her fate. The arsenic's path is maddeningly close. Dr. Pender's aphorism echoed, truth lies in the overlooked. The napkin, the stain, the tin, they're fragments of a shattered mirror reflecting the killer's face. The group erupted in theories, each voice a thread in the tapestry. Raymond proposed a poison utensil, swapped in a moment's chaos. Jane Hellier imagined Eliza dabbing the napkin with arsenic, a nurse's precision turned sinister. Joyce suggested the tablecloth stain came from a spilled vial fumbled in haste. Dr. Pender urged a broader view, citing human error as the devil's tool. Miss Marple, her teacup poised, spoke with quiet conviction. In our village, a seamstress once stained her lace with dye meant for a rival's gown. The mark was small, but it led to her confession. Your napkin, Sir Henry, is Clara's final gesture, pointing to the hand that betrayed her. Sir Henry's mustache twitched, a spark of hope in his gaze. You've got a knack for seeing the unseen, Miss Marple. The napkin, the tin, the tablecloth. They mocked us at the yard. We had no witnesses, no confessions. Edmund and Eliza closed ranks, their grief or guilt impenetrable. The case faded, but its claws remain. The fire dimmed, its glow softening the room's edges. Raymond stowed his kaleidoscope, his voice resolute. We're peeling back the layers. Next week, let's chase these clues to their source. Jane Hellier adjusted her fascinator, her tone vibrant. I'll rehearse their movements, every step a clue to the crime's choreography. Joyce sealed her sketchpad. I'll craft a mural of these fragments, tin, napkin, stain. Dr. Pender pocketed his book. And I'll seek wisdom in the spaces between, where truth hides. Miss Marple poured the last of the tea, her smile a beacon of clarity. Clues are the stitches. We'll sew them into a pattern yet. As the stars brightened outside, the group stepped into the crisp night, their minds alight with the case's tantalizing fragments. The cottage fell silent, but the clues' whispers lingered, a satisfying pause, the puzzle pieces gleaming, poised for the next revelation.
Chapter 7. Twists of Allegiance. The seventh gathering of the Tuesday Night Club unfolded under a moonless sky. The air in St. Mary Mead thick with the scent of autumn leaves and distant wood smoke. Miss Jane Marple's cottage glowed like a lantern against the darkness, its ivy-clad walls embracing the flicker of candlelight from within. The sitting room was a sanctuary of anticipation, adorned with a tray of honey-drizzled crumpets and a gleaming copper kettle hissing with jasmine tea. The members arrived, each bearing a token of their unique lens on the world. Raymond West, with a polished abalone shell, its iridescent swirls mirroring his shifting theories. Sir Henry Clithering clutching a sealed envelope, its wax stamp hinting its secrets unearthed. Jane Hellier swathed in a crimson sash that flowed like a river of intrigue. Joyce Lempriere toting a roll of parchment etched with shadowy silhouettes, and Dr. Pender, his fingers tracing a small ebony rosary, its beads clicking with quiet contemplation. They settled into the familiar circle, the hearth's flames casting a dance of light across the room, weaving warmth into the chill of the mystery. Raymond, spinning the abalone shell in his palm, broke the hush with a spark of impatience. "Sir Henry, your clues last time, napkin, tin, tablecloth stain, have us teetering on the edge. We've got motives aplenty, but now it's about loyalty. Who stood by whom in Eldridge Bay, and who twisted the knife?" Sir Henry, his envelope resting on his knee like a talisman, cracked the wax seal with a deliberate snap, revealing a sheaf of handwritten notes. Allegiances, indeed, the invisible threads that bind or betray. In my time at the Yard, I saw alliances shift like tides, revealing truths in their ebb. Let's return to Seacrest Manor, October 1919, where the crab supper turned fatal, and peel back the layers of loyalty between Edmund Reeves, Eliza Croft, and the late Clara. He leaned forward, his voice a low rumble, conjuring the manor's wind-swept halls. After Clara's death, the town mourned, but suspicion coiled around Edmund and Eliza like seaweed. Edmund, the dashing importer, played the grieving widower to perfection. Black armband, lowered gaze, a donation to the church in Clara's name. But his eyes darted when we questioned him, as if guarding a secret harbor. Eliza, the steadfast companion, wore her sorrow like a veil, tending the manor's affairs with mechanical precision. But their stories, when probed, began to fray. Jane Hellyer, her crimson sash catching the firelight like a warning flag, leaned in with theatrical intensity. "A veil of sorrow? Oh, it's the perfect mask for guilt! In my play, The Shattered Chalice, the widow's tears hit a murderer's heart. Were they in league, Edmund and Eliza, plotting together?" Joyce Lempriere unrolled her parchment, revealing a sketch of two figures entwined against a stormy cliff, their faces half hidden. "I'd draw them as shadows merging, one heart, two motives. But what bound them, love or conspiracy?" Dr. Pender, his rosary beads clicking softly, spoke with measured gravity. "Loyalty can be a chain or a blade. In Scripture, Judas's kiss was allegiance turned treacherous. Did one betray the other, or were they united in sin?" Miss Jane Marple's knitting needles paused, her voice a quiet ripple. "In St. Mary Mead, our florist's wife once saw her husband gift a rose to another. She said nothing, but her pruning shears grew sharper. Allegiances shift when hearts are at stake, but they leave traces, gestures, glances, silences."
Sir Henry flipped to a new page, detailing a discovery that tightened the web. "We found a letter, not Clara's, but Eliza's, tucked in a hidden drawer in her bedroom. It was addressed to Edmund, unsent, dated the night of the supper. I've done as you asked, though my soul quakes. If we're free, let it be honest. Cryptic, but damning." When confronted, Eliza claimed it was a draft about resigning, nothing more. Her composure cracked, just for a moment. Raymond leaned forward, his shell forgotten. "She's confessing, but to what? Poison or passion?" Jane Hellier's voice rose, vibrant as a spotlight. "Passion! Picture her, penning that note in candlelight, her heart racing as the arsenic waited. She loved him enough to kill." Joyce's sketch evolved, Eliza's figure now clutching a letter, her face torn between devotion and dread. "I'd incur as a siren, luring Edmund to doom, or salvation." Sir Henry held up a hand, tempering the fervor. "Hold your theories, there's more.
Edmund's allegiance wasn't just to Eliza or Clara. It extended to his creditors. We traced J. Black, the name in his ledgers, not a loan shark, but a pseudonym for a smuggler, Jacob Blackwood, who'd been funneling contraband spices through Edmund's shipments. A dock worker confirmed Blackwood visited Seacrest days before the supper, arguing with Edmund in the boathouse. Words like payment and exposure floated on the wind. Dr. Pender's rosary stilled, his eyes narrowing. A criminal alliance. If Edmund owed Blackwood, Clara's death might have been a transaction, her fortune for his freedom. Sir Henry nodded, producing a final item from the envelope, a torn receipt stamped with a smuggler's mark. This was found in the boathouse, dated the day of Blackwood's visit. It listed white powder, medicinal, purchased from a Plymouth apothecary. No proof it was arsenic, but the timing chilled us. Edmund denied knowing Blackwood beyond business. Eliza swore she'd never met him, yet their stories aligned too neatly, like rehearsed lines. Raymond's voice crackled with excitement. A smuggler's plot. Blackwood supplies the poison, Edmund and Eliza execute the plan. Clara's the price for their escape. Jane Hellyer clapped, her sash swirling. It's a conspiracy worthy of the stage. 3 players, Edmund, Eliza, Blackwood, bound by greed and secrets. Joyce's parchment now held a boathouse under moonlight, figures conspiring in shadows. I'd draw them as a triangle, each point sharp enough to cut. Dr. Pender's voice was a quiet anchor. Yet allegiances fracture under pressure. If Blackwood was involved, why no trace after? Perhaps he was the scapegoat, not the mastermind. Miss Marple set her knitting aside, her gaze sharp as a needle's point. In our village, a carpenter once swore loyalty to a friend, only to sell his tools to settle a debt. The buyer's mark on the receipt gave him away. Your smuggler's receipt, Sir Henry, is a knot in the thread. Pull it, and the truth may unravel. Sir Henry's eyes gleamed with respect. You've a gift, Miss Marple. The receipt led nowhere. Blackwood vanished, and the apothecary claimed no memory of the sale. But it shifted our lens. Edmund and Eliza's bond, whether love or collusion, was the fulcrum. Their glances, their silences, their shared grief, it was a performance, but for whom? The fire popped, sending sparks spiraling, like fleeting clues. Raymond stowed his shell, his voice resolute. We're close. Their allegiances, romantic, criminal, or both, are the key. Next week, let's break their facade. Jane Hellyer adjusted her fascinator, her tone vibrant. I'll stage their final act, every glance a confession. Joyce rolled her parchment. I'll craft their silhouettes into a mural of betrayal. Dr. Pender pocketed his rosary. And I'll seek the divine spark in their darkened hearts. Miss Marple poured the last of the tea, her smile serene but incisive. Allegiances are the weave. We'll find the loose thread. As the night deepened, the group stepped into the starlit chill, their minds ablaze with the case's twists. The cottage hushed, but the echoes of loyalty and betrayal lingered. A satisfying pause, the puzzle's heart beating stronger, poised for the next revelation.
Chapter 8. Theories Ablaze. The 8th gathering of the Tuesday Night Club convened under a sky ablaze with the fiery hues of a late September sunset, casting St. Mary Mead in a glow that seemed to pulse with the intensity of the mystery at hand. Miss Jane Marple's cottage stood as a steadfast haven, its stone walls warmed by the fading light, the air within rich with the scent of warm plum scones and a pot of rich Keeman tea steaming gently on the polished oak sideboard. The members arrived, each bearing a token of their unique perspective. Raymond West with a tarnished pocket watch,
its ticking a restless echo of time's secrets. Sir Henry Clithering, clutching a leather-bound case file, its edges frayed from years of pondering. Jane Helier draped in a shawl of peacock green silk that shimmered like a stage curtain. Joyce Lempriere toting a bundle of charcoal drawings, their stark lines hinting at unseen truths. And Dr. Pender, his hands clasped around a small velvet pouch containing a silver medallion etched with a labyrinth. They settled into the familiar circle, the hearth's flames leaping with a vigor that mirrored the group's mounting anticipation. Raymond, winding his pocket watch with a nervous flick, broke the silence with a spark of urgency. "Sir Henry, you've woven a tapestry of treachery. Edmund and Eliza's tangled loyalties, a smuggler's receipt, a hidden tin of poison. We're burning to pin this crime down. Let's strike the match. Whose theories hold the flame?" Sir Henry, his case file open to a page marked with a black quill, leaned forward, his eyes glinting with the weight of unresolved questions. "Theories, my friends, are the sparks that light the path or set the wrong one ablaze. At the Yard, we learn to test each flame against the evidence. Let's return to Seacrest Manor, October 1919, and fan the embers of that fatal supper. The arsenic, the napkin, the tablecloth stain. Let's see whose hypothesis catches fire." He paused, conjuring the manor's dining room, a chandelier swaying in the sea wind, crab shells scattered like relics of a feast gone sour, Clara's final breaths echoing in the silence. "We've got two prime players, Edmund Reeves, the debt-ridden importer with a fortune to gain, and Eliza Croft, the devoted companion with a nurse's precision and a heart shadowed by longing. Their allegiances, romantic, criminal, or both, are our tinder. Let's ignite the debate." Jane Helier, her shawl catching the firelight like a cascade of emeralds, leaned forward with theatrical zeal. "Edmund's my bet. Picture him, the dashing captain turned merchant, his dreams drowning in debt. Clara's death is his lifeline, a cold, calculated act cloaked in grief. In my play, The Gilded Cage, the husband poisons with a smile. He slipped the arsenic into her glass, a toast to his freedom." Joyce Lempriere, unrolling her charcoal drawings to reveal a stark portrait of Edmund, his face half lit by menace, nodded. "I'd sketch him as a tempest, all charm on the surface, chaos beneath. The smuggler's receipt, his deal with Blackwood, was the blueprint. Arsenic for wealth, a devil's bargain." Dr. Pender, his medallion glinting as he turned it in his palm, spoke with measured calm. "Greed is a fire that consumes reason, yet Scripture warns the love of money is the root of all evil. Edmund's ledgers scream motive, but his method, slipping poison past two witnesses, requires cunning beyond desperation." Miss Marple, her knitting needles crafting a web of soft gray wool, listened with a quiet intensity, her eyes flickering like embers catching a breeze. In St. Mary Mead, our butcher once overcharged a widow, not for profit, but to settle a grudge. Motives burn brightly, but it's the quiet acts that spark the blaze. Sir Henry, flipping a page in his case file, revealed a sketch of the dining table's layout, annotated with forensic notes. "Let's test Jane's theory. Edmund poured the wine, handled the bottle, the glass's residue, faint arsenic, points to a possible delivery. But the stain on the tablecloth beneath Clara's plate complicates it. If he dosed her glass, why the spill? A fumble in haste or a deliberate misdirection?" Raymond, his watch ticking louder, jumped in. "A misdirection! Edmund's no fool. He's a naval man, used to plotting courses through storms. Suppose he spiked the wine, knowing Clara's delicate palate would sip first. The tablecloth stain? A calculated drip to muddy the waters, make it look accidental." Jane clapped, her shawl swirling. "Brilliant, darling. It's a stage trick. Spill a drop to sell the lie. He plays the doting husband, all while orchestrating her exit." Sir Henry,
Raising a hand, his voice steady as a judge's gavel, "Hold the applause! The wine was poured from one bottle, tested clean. If Edmund tampered, he'd need sleight of hand to dose only Clara's glass, with Eliza watching like a hawk. Let's shift to Eliza. Her nursing past, handling arsenic in wartime wards, gives her the edge. The hidden tin in the pantry, her domain, screams opportunity. Suppose she laced Clara's portion, perhaps in the crab seasoning, knowing Clara's frail heart would falter first?" Joyce's charcoal scratched, adding Eliza's silhouette, her hands poised over a phantom platter. "I draw her as a shadow weaver, threading poison into the meal's fabric. The napkin's residue. Maybe she wiped her hands after dosing, leaving a trace." Dr. Pender's medallion paused, his voice soft but piercing. Eliza's loyalty to Clara was her mask, but love for Edmund could turn it to malice. As the psalmist says, the heart is deceitful above all things. Her letter, "I've done as you asked," hints at complicity, but whose hand held the poison? Raymond, leaning forward, his watch forgotten. "A partnership! Eliza is the hand, Edmund's the mind. They conspire. Her knowledge, his motive. The tin is hers, but he plants it to shift blame if caught."
Sir Henry's mustache twitched, a spark of intrigue in his gaze. A compelling theory, but it stumbles on the napkin. Why Clara's alone? If Eliza dosed the crab, all three should have suffered. The forensic report noted Clara's symptoms hit fastest, 10 minutes before Edmund's, 15 before Eliza's. The arsenic was targeted, precise. Let's explore a new angle, the greenhouse. Clara's hands, post-mortem, bore soiled traces, despite washing. We found a vial of arsenical spray, sealed, but its cap was loose, as if recently handled. Jane Hellier's shawl shimmered as she gasped. The orchids! Clara's pride, her sanctuary. What if the poison came from her own garden, sprinkled like dew on her portion? Eliza, tending the plants, could have harvested death itself. Joyce's drawing evolved, a greenhouse, blooming with sinister petals. I'd sketch it as a jungle of secrets, vines dripping venom, the soil on Clara's hands, a clue she touched her own doom. Miss Marple's needles paused, her voice a gentle ripple. "In our village, a gardener once blamed blight for his ruined roses, but I noticed his spade's edge was dusted with lime, not soil. Small traces, like Clara's, point to larger truths. The greenhouse vial, perhaps it was opened, not to spray, but to steal." Sir Henry nodded, pulling a faded inventory list from his file. "Astute, Miss Marple. The vial's contents matched the arsenic in Clara's system, same chemical signature, but no fingerprints, and Eliza swore she hadn't touched it since summer. Edmund, meanwhile, claimed he avoided the greenhouse, Clara's domain, he called it. Yet a gardener's log noted Edmund fetching tools there the day before, a detail he omitted. Raymond's watch ticked louder, his voice urgent. "Edmund in the greenhouse? He's covering his tracks. He takes the arsenic, passes it to Eliza for the deed. The loose cap's his slip-up." Jane Hellier clapped again, her tone vibrant. "A duet of deceit. Edmund procures, Eliza delivers. The napkin's residue, her nervous wipe after dosing Clara's crab." Dr. Pender's medallion glinted as he spoke. "Yet deception requires trust. If they colluded, their allegiance was ironclad, or brittle enough to crack under scrutiny. The letter suggests Eliza wavered, her soul quaking." Sir Henry flipped to a witness statement, his voice sharpening. A neighbor, Mrs. Finch, added fuel. She saw Edmund and Eliza in the garden shed days before, heads bent over a crate, like conspirators, she said. When we searched, we found nothing but gardening tools, yet her account lingered. Were they planning
or merely arguing? The fire roared, its flames mirroring the group's fervor. Joyce's charcoal captured the shed, its door ajar, shadows conspiring within. I'd draw it as a crucible, forging their pact or their betrayal. Raymond tossed out a wild card. What about the smuggler, Blackwood? His receipt for white powder screams involvement. Maybe he supplied the arsenic, and Edmund and Eliza were his pawns. Sir Henry Head shook his head. We chased Blackwood's shadow. No trace after that visit. The receipt's a ghost, leading nowhere. The real fire lies in the manor. Edmund and Eliza, their motives entwined. Jane Hellier spun a new thread, her voice a dramatic lilt. Or Eliza acted alone, her love for Edmund a twisted devotion. She poisons Clara, hoping to win him, only to find his heart cold as the sea. Dr. Pender's voice was a quiet anchor. Solitary malice is possible, but love seeks reciprocity. Her letter suggests she acted for Edmund, not against him. Miss Marple, setting her knitting aside, spoke with serene clarity. In St. Mary Mead, a dairymaid once spiked a rival's churn with vinegar, not for hate, but to please a suitor. The act bound them, but only until the truth soured. Your shed, Sir Henry, is where allegiances were tested, perhaps sealed. Sir Henry's eyes gleamed with respect. You cut to the bone, Miss Marple. The shed, the napkin, the vial, they're sparks, but the fire's source eludes us. The yard dismissed Blackwood as a red herring, focusing on the manor's duo. Their stories held, but their glances betrayed them. The group erupted, theories blazing like wildfire. Raymond championed Edmund as mastermind, orchestrating through Eliza's hands. Jane cast Eliza as the scorned lover, her poison a cry for Edmund's heart. Joyce proposed a dual plot, their shed meeting a vow to kill. Dr. Pender urged caution, citing the parable of the tares among wheat, evil hidden in plain sight. As the fire dimmed, Raymond stowed his watch, his voice resolute. We've lit the fuse! Next week, let's fan the flames to the truth. Jane adjusted her shawl, her tone vibrant. I'll choreograph their dance of deceit, every step a clue. Joyce bundled her drawings. I'll craft a blaze of their motives, inked in fire. Dr. Pender pocketed his medallion. And I'll seek the light of truth amid the ashes. Miss Marple poured the last of the tea, her smile a beacon of calm. Theories burn bright, but truth is the ember that endures. They stepped into the starry night, the village hushed under the sunset's fading glow. The cottage fell silent, but the blaze of theories lingered, a satisfying crescendo, the puzzle's heart alight, poised for the final unveiling.
Chapter 9. The Gentle Observer Speaks. The ninth gathering of the Tuesday Night Club unfolded beneath a sky dappled with wispy clouds, the twilight air in St. Mary Mead carrying a faint tang of harvest apples and freshly turned earth. Miss Jane Marple's cottage stood as a quiet sentinel, its thatched roof gilded by the setting sun, its windows spilling a soft amber glow onto the dew-dappled roses. Inside, the sitting room was a haven of understated elegance, the hearth aglow with oak logs that crackled with a comforting rhythm. The tea tray, a study in refinement, bore delicate rosewater macarons and a porcelain pot of fragrant Darjeeling, its steam curling like whispered secrets. The club members arrived, each bearing a token of their unique perspective. Raymond West, with a small ivory chess pawn, its smooth surface a mirror for his strategic musings. Sir Henry Clithering clutching a dog-eared police report, its margins crowded with annotations. Jane Hellier swathed in a gossamer veil that shimmered like moonlight on water.
Joyce Lempriere toting a canvas roll of watercolor sketches, their hues vibrant with emotion. And Dr. Pender, his fingers tracing a pocket-sized prayer book, its pages worn from years of solace. They settled into their familiar circle, the firelight casting intricate shadows that danced like the mystery's elusive threads. Raymond, rolling the chess pawn between his fingers, broke the hush with a spark of anticipation. "Sir Henry, your last tale set our theories ablaze. Edmund's greed, Eliza's hidden love, a smuggler's ghost. We're teetering on the truth's edge. But tonight, let's hear from the quiet one. Aunt Jane, you've been weaving this puzzle in your mind. What does the gentle observer see?" All eyes turned to Miss Marple. Her knitting needles paused mid-stitch, crafting a delicate scarf of pale lavender wool. Her eyes, sharp as polished steel, twinkled with a serene certainty, her presence a calm anchor in the room's fervor. "My dear Raymond," she began, her voice soft, yet resonant, like a bell tolling in a distant valley. "You all have spun such vivid threads, motives, clues, allegiances. But in my little corner of St. Mary Mead, I've learned that truth often hides in the ordinary, in the small gestures we overlook. Let's revisit Seacrest Manor, October 1919, and see what the shadows conceal." Sir Henry, his police report resting on his knee, leaned forward, his mustache twitching with curiosity. "Miss Marple, your village tales have a way of cutting through fog. The arsenic, the napkin, the tablecloth stain. Where do your eyes land?" Miss Marple set her knitting aside, her hands folded neatly in her lap. "Let's walk through that fateful supper, not as detectives, but as neighbors might, watching, noticing. The crab, fresh from the harbor, was boiled by Eliza, picked by Clara, and served by all three. The wine, poured by Edmund, sparkled in glasses, but only Clara's held a trace of arsenic. The tablecloth bore a yellow stain, the napkin a gritty residue, and a tin of poison hid in the pantry's shadows. These are not grand gestures, but quiet ones, like a mislaid stitch in a seam." Jane Hillier, her veil catching the firelight like a cascade of stars, leaned in with theatrical eagerness. "Quiet gestures! Oh, it's like a scene from The Whispered Oath, where the villain's glance betrays them. Do you see Eliza slipping poison with a nurse's precision?" Joyce Lempriere unrolled her canvas, revealing a watercolor of the dining room, its colors muted yet sharp, Clara's figure fading into mist. "What's your palette, Miss Marple?" Dr. Pender, his prayer book open to a passage on discernment, spoke softly. "The heart's quiet sins often speak loudest. As the book of Proverbs says, wisdom rests in the heart of the discerning. What wisdom do you find in these clues?" Miss Marple's smile was gentle, but her words carried a scalpel's edge. "In St. Mary Mead, we had a grocer, Mr. Tuttle, whose scales tipped unfairly for one customer alone, a rival's wife. It wasn't the weight, but the intent that mattered. At Seacrest, the arsenic was no accident. It was meant for Clara alone. Let's consider the napkin, that humble cloth. Its residue suggests Clara touched the poison, perhaps wiping her lips or hands. But she'd washed before dinner, Eliza said. Yet her hands bore greenhouse soil. Why? Raymond's chess pawn stilled in his voice eager. A contradiction! The soil! Could it mean she handled the arsenic herself unknowingly? Miss Marple shook her head, her eyes distant yet focused. Not unknowingly, Raymond. Clara was meticulous, a botanist who knew her plants. The greenhouse vial, its cap loose, tells a story. Suppose someone, Edmund or Eliza, opened it, not for spraying pests, but to borrow a pinch of death. The soil on Clara's hands wasn't from potting, it was from handling that vial, perhaps checking it, sensing something amiss.
Sir Henry's report crinkled as he leaned closer. A bold leap, Miss Marple. The vial's arsenic matched Clara's toxicology, but no prints, no proof. How does it reach her napkin? Miss Marple's voice was a quiet melody weaving through the room's tension. Think of the supper's rhythm. Eliza serves the crab, Clara picks her portion, Edmund pours the wine. But the napkin, folded neatly by her plate, was it truly hers alone? In our village, a maid once swapped napkins at a tea, lacing one with salt to spoil a rival's taste. Suppose the napkin was dosed not with a liquid, but a powder, brushed to its fibers. Clara wipes her mouth, and the arsenic transfers, subtle, precise. Jane Hellyer gasped, her veil fluttering. A poisoned napkin! It's pure stagecraft, silent, deadly, like a prop in a tragedy. Eliza's hands, trained in wartime wards, could manage it. Joyce's watercolor evolved, the napkin now a ghostly shroud, its edges tinged with menace. I'd paint it as a specter, carrying death in its folds. But who placed it? Dr. Pender's prayer book closed with a soft thud. Intent is the sin's root. If Eliza dosed the napkin, her loyalty to Clara was a facade. Yet the letter, "I've done as you asked," suggests she followed another's lead. Miss Marple nodded, her fingers tracing the scarf's delicate loops. Exactly, Dr. Pender. The letter is our beacon. Eliza wrote to Edmund, trembling with doubt. She said, "My soul quakes." This wasn't her plan alone. She acted under his shadow. Edmund, with his debts pressing like a vice, saw Clara's fortune as his escape. But he needed a partner, someone with skill and access. Eliza, bound by unspoken love, was his instrument. Raymond's pawn clattered to the table, his voice alight. A conspiracy. Edmund orchestrates, Eliza executes. The napkin's her touch, delicate, deadly, like a nurse's syringe. Sir Henry's mustache twitched, a spark of awe in his gaze. It fits, Miss Marple. The napkin's residue, the tablecloth stain, both point to a targeted act. But why the tin in the pantry? Hide it so clumsily. Miss Marple's smile was serene, her logic unyielding. The tin was no mistake, it was a shield. In St. Mary Mead, a farmer once left a broken rake in plain sight to distract from his stolen grain. The tin was meant to be found, to cast suspicion on the kitchen, on Eliza alone. Edmund, the strategist, knew the yard would seize it, turning eyes from his own moves. He poured the wine, yes, but he also set the table, napkins included. Jane Hellyer's veil fluttered as she clapped. Brilliant! It's a duet of deception. Edmund the director, Eliza the actress. The greenhouse vial, the napkin, the tin, all props in their grim play. Joyce's watercolor now held two figures, their hands entwined over a poisoned cloth. I'd paint them as marionettes, strings pulled by greed and desire. Dr. Pender's voice was a quiet anchor. Yet the heart resists such cold calculation. Eliza's letter suggests remorse, a soul torn. Was she truly complicit or coerced? Miss Marple leaned forward, her gaze piercing. Eliza loved Edmund, Dr. Pender. Love blinds, but it also binds. She acted for him, believing freedom awaited them both. The shed meeting, the smuggler's receipt, these were Edmund's distractions, smoke to cloud the truth. Blackwood was a shadow, not the substance. The real crime was intimate, domestic. A napkin, a glance, a moment's trust betrayed. Sir Henry's mustache twitched, a spark of awe in his gaze. You've unraveled it, Miss Marple. The napkin's the key. Targeted, personal. But no confession? We pressed them both. Edmund's grief seemed genuine. Eliza's sorrow impenetrable. Miss Marple's voice softened, a note of compassion threading through. Grief can be real, even in guilt. In our village, a seamstress once stole a bolt of silk, then cried for her friend's loss. Edmund mourned Clara, but not enough to forego her fortune. Eliza's tears were for her own soul, stained by a choice she couldn't undo. They protected each other not for loyalty, but necessity.
Exposure would ruin them both. The fire crackled, its embers glowing like the case's final sparks. Raymond leaned back, his pawn forgotten. "Aunt Jane, you've turned our blaze into a beacon. It's them, together, bound by crime." Jane Hellier's veil fluttered as she sighed. "It's a tragedy worthy of the stage, love and greed, a deadly dance. I'd play Eliza, torn between devotion and damnation." Joyce sealed her canvas, her watercolor complete, a haunting scene of betrayal. I'd frame it as a requiem, their shadows merging into one. Dr. Pender pocketed his prayer book, his voice solemn. As Ecclesiastes warns, all is vanity. Their sin was in seeking freedom through blood, yet redemption eludes them. Sir Henry closed his report, his voice heavy with respect. "Miss Marple, you've done what the yard couldn't, tied the threads into a noose. The napkin, the tin, the letter, your wisdom saw what we missed." Miss Marple poured the last of the tea, her smile gentle but unyielding. "Human nature is the same, Sir Henry, whether in a manor or a hamlet. We see it best when we look quietly at the edges of life's tapestry." The group lingered, their bond tightened by the unraveling truth. Raymond raised his teacup in a toast. "To Aunt Jane, the gentle observer who sees all." As the twilight deepened, they stepped into the crisp night, the stars above St. Mary Mead winking like silent witnesses. The cottage fell quiet, but the truth's clarity lingered, a satisfying crescendo. The puzzle's heart laid bare, poised for the final reckoning.
Chapter 10. Justice in the Twilight. The final gathering of the Tuesday night club unfolded beneath a sky awash with the tender hues of a fading September twilight. St. Mary Mead cloaked in a serene hush that seemed to cradle the weight of revelation. Miss Jane Marple's cottage stood as a timeless anchor, its stone walls kissed by the last rays of sun, the air within rich with the scent of warm cinnamon buns and a silver teapot steaming with fragrant lapsang souchong. The members arrived, their steps lighter yet laden with the gravity of closure. Raymond West, clutching a small brass telescope, its lens reflecting his quest for clarity. Sir Henry Clithering, holding a weathered journal, its pages heavy with the case's final notes. Jane Hellier, draped in a cloak of midnight blue velvet that shimmered like a starless sky. Joyce Lempriere, toting a single parchment, its ink a testament to the mysteries unraveling. And Dr. Pender, his hands clasping a carved wooden box, its lid etched with a dove of peace. They settled into their familiar circle, the hearth's flames casting a soft glow that wove warmth into the room's quiet anticipation. Raymond, adjusting the telescope's focus, as if peering into the past, broke the silence with a note of reverence. "Aunt Jane, your gentle wisdom lit up this puzzle last week. Edmund and Eliza, bound by love and poison. Clara's napkin, their silent weapon. We're at the end now, Sir Henry. Tell us, did justice find them in Eldridge Bay, or did they slip through the twilight?" Sir Henry, his journal open to a page marked with a silver ribbon, leaned forward, his eyes alight with the bitter-sweet glow of resolution. "Justice, my friends, is a lantern in the dusk, sometimes dim but never extinguished." Miss Marple's insight cut through the fog of 1919, pointing to a conspiracy woven in whispers and shadows. Let's return to Seacrest Manor one last time to see how the threads of guilt were finally knotted. He paused, conjuring the manor's wind-swept halls, the echoes of that fatal supper lingering like a distant storm. Clara Reeves lay dead, her frail heart stopped by arsenic, her napkin and tablecloth stained with the poison's trace. Edmund, the debt-ridden importer, and Eliza, the loyal companion with a heart swayed by love, stood under suspicion. Miss Marple saw the truth. A napkin, dosed with arsenic, a tin hidden to deflect blame, a greenhouse vial tampered with by hands too cunning to leave prints. Jane Hellier, her cloak pooling around her like spilled ink, leaned in with theatrical intensity. "It's a finale worthy of the stage." Edmund, the mastermind, pulling Eliza's strings,
She, the nurse, wielding poison for love. But how did the Yard catch them? Did they confess under the spotlight? Joyce Lempriere unrolled her parchment, revealing a final sketch. 2 figures in a courtroom, their faces etched with defiance and despair. I'd ink this as a requiem, justice closing in like twilight. What sealed their fate? Dr. Pender, opening his wooden box to reveal a single white feather, spoke with quiet solemnity. Justice is the soul's reckoning, as the Gospels teach. What is hidden will be revealed. Did their consciences betray them, or was it evidence? Miss Marple, her knitting needles crafting a final square of soft cream wool, smiled gently, her eyes sharp as ever. In St. Mary Mead, truth often surfaces in the quiet moments, a glance, a slip, a neighbor's memory. Your lantern, Sir Henry, surely found its mark. Sir Henry nodded, his journal yielding a detailed account of the investigation's climax. After Clara's death, the Yard's net tightened. We had the napkin's residue, the tablecloth's stain, the hidden tin, and Eliza's cryptic letter. I've done as you asked. But proof was elusive, their stories held like a ship's rigging in a gale. Edmund played the grieving widower, donating to the church, while Eliza managed the manor with a mourner's grace. Yet cracks appeared, small but telling. He flipped a page revealing a statement from a local apothecary. We revisited the smuggler's receipt. White powder, medicinal, purchased days before the supper. The apothecary, Mr. Wen, had been reluctant, fearing reprise, but under pressure, he recalled Edmund visiting his shop, not Blackwood, asking for garden supplies that could double as rat poison. The receipt was in Blackwood's name to shield Edmund, a ruse to distance the purchase. Raymond's telescope gleamed as he leaned forward. Edmund bought the arsenic? He's the puppeteer, planting the tin to frame Eliza if needed. But how did you tie it to the napkin? Sir Henry's voice deepened, a judge recounting a verdict. We retraced the supper's choreography. Eliza served the crab. Clara picked her portion. Edmund poured the wine. But the napkins, folded by Edmund that evening, per the cook's testimony, were key. We tested Clara's again, finding arsenic embedded in the weave, not just on the surface. It wasn't a spill. It was deliberate. A powder brushed into the fibers, activated when Clara wiped her lips. Her hands, dusted with greenhouse soil, carried traces from checking the vial, her last act of suspicion. Jane Hellier's cloak rustled as she gasped. A poisoned cloth! It's pure poetry! Death in a domestic touch! Edmund's hands, setting the table, sealed her fate. Joyce's sketch evolved, the courtroom now framed by a ghostly napkin, its folds heavy with guilt. I'd paint it as a shroud, wrapping Clara in betrayal. But how did Eliza fit in?
Dr. Pender's feather lay still in his palm, his voice soft but piercing. Eliza's letter suggests complicity, yet her soul quaked. Was she a pawn or a partner in this sin? Miss Marple's needles paused, her voice a gentle current. In our village, a baker's wife once followed her husband's orders to shortchange a rival, her heart heavy with doubt. Eliza loved Edmund, enough to act, but not enough to trust. Her letter was her cry, a plea for truth amid lies. Sir Henry turned to a final page, a confession transcribed in his meticulous hand. The breakthrough came weeks later, when Eliza broke. We brought her to the Yard, not for interrogation, but observation. She sat in a bare room, her composure fraying like old lace. I showed her the napkin, the tin, her own letter. Her eyes, those steady nurse's eyes, faltered. She promised freedom, she whispered. A life together, no debts, no shadows. She admitted dusting the napkin with arsenic from the greenhouse vial, at Edmund's urging. He'd procured it, disguised as a pest control purchase, and convinced her Clara's death would free them both. Raymond's telescope clattered to the table, his voice alight. She confessed. Edmund's the architect, Eliza the executioner. But did he betray her too? Sir Henry nodded, his journal closing with a soft thud.
Eliza's confession turned the tide. Confronted with her words, Edmund crumbled. He admitted the plan: Clara's fortune to clear his debts, a new life with Eliza in London. The smuggler, Blackwood, was a decoy, a name to muddy the trail. Edmund had bought the arsenic, hidden the tin, and placed the doused napkin, knowing Clara's habit of dabbing her lips after every bite. Eliza, torn by love, followed his lead, believing his promises. Jane Hellier clapped, her cloak shimmering. A tragic duet. It's a script for the ages, love and greed, a fatal dance under candlelight. Joyce's parchment now held a final stroke. Two figures in chains, their shadows merging into one. I'd paint them as fallen stars, their light snuffed by justice. Dr. Pender's feather gleamed, his voice solemn. As Matthew warns, what you sow, so shall you reap. Their harvest was judgment, their love a poisoned seed. Sir Henry leaned back, his face etched with the weight of closure. The trial was swift. Eliza's testimony, paired with the napkin's evidence, sealed their fate. Edmund was convicted of murder, Eliza as accessory. He faced the gallows, she a long sentence in Holloway. Eldridge Bay mourned Clara anew, the manor sold to strangers. The case closed, but its echoes lingered, a lesson in the frailty of human bonds. The fire dimmed, its embers glowing like the last rays of truth. Raymond raised his teacup, his voice warm. To justice, and to Aunt Jane, whose quiet eyes saw it all. Miss Marple smiled, her knitting complete, the scarf a testament to patience. In St. Mary Mead, justice comes slowly, but it comes. Human nature writes the story, and we merely read its lines. Jane Hellier sighed, her cloak pooling like twilight. A perfect curtain call, tragedy, truth, and a village sage to guide us. Joyce rolled her parchment, her voice soft. I'll frame this as my final piece, a testament to clarity. Dr. Pender closed his box, the dove gleaming, and I'll carry this lesson. Truth prevails even in the darkest hearts. The group lingered, their bond forged in the crucible of revelation. They toasted to the Tuesday night club, to mysteries unraveled, and to the quiet wisdom that lit the way. As they stepped into the starry night, the village hushed under the weight of closure, the cottage's glow fading like a lantern extinguished. The story was complete, its justice a beacon in the twilight, leaving no threads untied. A satisfying end to a shocking start.